Program, the merchants, did I miss anybody? Our town planner. I want to thank you all for coming tonight to hear a very impressive woman named Peg Berenger, who did a great study of market assessment really of downtown Wakefield, working with the merchants, working with people at Town Hall and everything. So I want to thank Peg for coming back. I promise she'd be back. She's so busy, it took us a little while to get her here, but we're very happy to have her here. And a little bit about Peg before she starts. Peg is the partner and founder of Fine Points Associates, which is out of Brookline, which is a Massachusetts-based consulting firm with clients throughout the United States. In fact, she has worked with over 200 communities across the country, doing really similar to what she's doing here for us in Wakefield. She has 25 years of experience, has degrees from Syracuse. Being from Georgetown, I'm going to let that go anyway. Not many people know that joke, I guess. University of Rhode Island. She's also a teacher or an adjunct professor for 25 years, teaching urban policy at Tufts University. And she's been a joy to work with throughout this whole experience. And if you haven't read her report, I think after tonight you'll be enticed to read it. If you have read it, you'll be enticed to read it again because there's some great stuff in there. So I'm going to turn this over to Peg. We have Selectman Donaco and Selectman May here this evening. Thank you. Peg.
Thank you. I'm going to talk with you from over in this corner, because this is as far as my cord will reach. It's really nice to be here. We worked on this project last fall, so it's been just about a year. So this is an anniversary that we're back. And it was really an effort with the town, the selectmen, the Wakefield Main Street Association, the town planning office, and we had a lot of volunteers that collected business information and did a business inventory. We had about 30 people that met with us for several meetings. So it was really a team effort. And I've been asked to come and talk about the findings and the presentation, kind of repeat the presentation that we did about a year ago tonight, and so it's delightful to be back in Wakefield. And I understand that a lot of things have been happening in the last year, so that's great to hear. What our work was all about is we basically were trying to provide foundational research that then would form a foundation that you could take some actions to keep the vibrancy in downtown. So we did a market analysis, we did an analysis of the real estate conditions, the business mix, and then working with our downtown task force, we came up with some key takeaways and suggestions. And so I'd like to talk to you about those three things tonight. We started looking at a market analysis, so we wanted to see where the customers would be likely to come from. And we did an analysis of where the competing commercial facilities were. And part of that was looking at, how far people would come, we thought, to come to downtown Wakefield, and what else was available for people to go to. And so you can take a look at that map, see if my cursor is working. The second ring is a 2-mile radius. And you can see that there's not too much competition inside of 2 miles, but outside of 2 miles, there seems to be more competition, and outside of 3, there's extremely amount of competition. So from that, and also from looking at the drive times, how far people would have to come to get, and what would be the travel times, what we settled on was that the primary trade area is probably about a 2-mile radius from downtown, the red circle, and there's probably also a secondary trade area, meaning there's some opportunity to draw sales from that green dotted line, but not as much as inside of the primary trade area. So once we have the trade area, we could look at some of the demographics and expenditure information for who lived in those areas. And so what you can see here is that we've got some good news. The market is pretty sizable. There's 40,000 people inside of that primary trade area, and there's 86,000 people in the secondary trade area. And the other piece of good news is that the market is growing. And so it looks like, from the projections we were able to find, is that it's growing about 1% a year, and that's a little bit faster than Massachusetts overall. So the market is pretty sizable, and the market is growing. We also looked at characteristics, and the predominantly middle to upper income, well educated. So the median household income in the primary trade area is $86,000, and a little bit higher in trade area 2, $88,000. And 43% of the households are over $100,000. So that's something that retailers often zero in on, what percentage of the population is over 100,000. Restaurants look at what part of the population is over 75,000, because it just means that there's a larger group that they might be targeting. The education level is a little bit higher than Massachusetts overall. So 52% of the trade area residents have at least an associate's degree. That's a little bit higher than Massachusetts. It's a lot higher than the United States overall. And when it comes to how these people spend their money, we looked at the primary trade area, and it looks like there's about $541 million a year spent on retail and restaurants. And from doing a sales linkage analysis, it looks like inside of that primary trade area, the businesses are capturing around 60% of it. So 40% is going outside of the 2-mile trade area. And then when we looked at the 3-mile trade area, it's about 70-30. So 70% of the businesses inside are capturing, businesses inside are capturing around 70%, and about 30% is leaking out. And then after the 3-mile, it drastically drops. So when we looked at sales leakage, it looked like there was leakage in just about every category except for health and personal care stores, drugstores, and other kinds of personal care stores. Just to give you an example, and there's a lot more information in the report, but I just wanted to hit some highlights for you tonight. An example of the sales leakage, one of the ones up there we could take a look at, there's $23 million in restaurant sales that's leaking outside of the primary trade area. So that means the residents are spending at least $23 million outside of the trade area. And you'd never expect to capture all of the restaurant sales, because people are always gonna go out to restaurants near where they work or where their friends live, or destination restaurants. But it looks, it gives it some opportunity. So it shows that there might be some opportunity to capture some additional restaurant sales here. And then the other market segments that we looked at, there's several actually. So the employees of area businesses, they're here, they increase the daytime population. They might be here to make a meal purchase or other purchases before or after work. And then there's several market segments that are attracted to nearby attractions or events. So people that are coming to the lake for recreation or for related events, the guests of the Sheraton Hotel, the users of BB Library. So one of the things that when we were working on this study, we found out the library told us they have 800 visitors a year, and 20% of them are outside of the town of Wakefield. So that's just an example of people are coming in, and they're going to attractions that are in or near downtown, and it's an opportunity possibly for them to visit restaurants or visit retail. Attendees of special events at the Civic Center or other locations, and users of the Galvin Middle School athletic fields or theater. And when we were working together as a team, a lot of the task force members, we got together, we talked about a lot of different possible ways to capture some of those market segments that are in the report. The second piece that we looked at in our study was the real estate conditions and business conditions, business mix in downtown. And one of the things that was striking is the amount of space and the amount of commercial units were there. So there's 321 commercial units and over 920,000 square feet. And just to put that in perspective, that's a little bit bigger than Market Street, Linfield, to give you an idea, and it's about only 25% less than the Burlington Mall. So there's really a fair amount of commercial space there. There is a lot of vacant space. There's more vacant space than we would like, but it looks like about 7% of the space, and that still compares pretty favorably to the national average. The national average for retail is about 9% and office about 12%. And so in downtown Wakefield, you have a mixture of retail and office. So the vacancy rate, even though it looks, it's very visible, it's still standing up, about to the national average. when we analyzed downtown, we saw it in sort of 3 different segments: the Albion North Avenue area, the Junction Avenue, and then the Main Street core. And so a lot of our analysis in the report kind of section out those 3 and look at those 3 areas. This chart just shows you where some of the larger spaces are, so the largest businesses in town. And then the chart on the right talks about your top 10 most frequently found tenants. So personal care and laundry tops the list. There's 43 businesses in this category, so there's a lot of businesses in this category. There's also a lot of eating and drinking establishments, so Wakefield is very lucky to have a good variety of restaurants and several restaurants in downtown. And then you can see the other mix of professional, scientific, finance, etc. I'm putting up here sort of a sample of some of the tenants, old favorites like Farmland, an interesting women's boutique Rada, standards like the hardware store, several interesting restaurants in downtown, from, Zuzu's to Cravings and Creations. A lot of nail salons, hair salons, personal care, and also financial services and other professional services. And one of the things that was interesting when we compiled the inventory and were working with our downtown task force members is to just see the listing of businesses categorized as if they were in a shopping mall, and seeing the depth of variety that you have in a lot of categories. It's not so apparent when you drive down the street or walk down the street, all of the things that are there. We did look at this mix compared to other downtowns. We also compared it to typical shopping centers and to the Market Street in Linfield. And a couple of things that came out of that was that, see those the yellow bars? The yellow bars are personal services and convenience goods. And so downtown Wakefield has a larger percentage of personal services and convenience goods than other downtowns and then Market Street. And it has a smaller percentage of comparison goods. Those are the red bars. And so that was one of the things that kind of came out of this. We also found that compared to other downtowns, Wakefield had less healthcare establishments, less professional services, like technical and engineering services. And some of the key takeaways and suggestions. And before I even start, I want to remind you that we did this a year ago. So it's kind of nice to look back on these. And when I was preparing for tonight, I was refreshing and looking at the suggestions and some of the things that came out of the study. And then I was looking at what's happened in Wakefield over the last year. And it was nice to see that a lot of things have happened. So a lot of the things that I'm going to mention in these key takeaways and suggestions, initiatives are already underway because a lot of things have taken off. So one of the findings that we came up with from the report, Wakefield seems to be a charming town center, many attractive historic buildings with a really walkable layout and a lovely common. And what was kind of striking to me is that this kind of layout is exactly what the new lifestyle center developers are trying to mimic. So people are realizing that people enjoy shopping and socializing in this kind of environment. And so now the new lifestyle developers, they are mimicking this town center feel with parking in front of the stores, similar to Wakefield already has. So this is Market Street in Linfield on the left, and the downtown Wakefield on the right. And I think they really have striking similarities. The physicality is very similar. This is Market Street in Linfield, and this is Wakefield. Market Street and Wakefield. Very similar pedestrian scale, a lot of the same aesthetic elements, walkability. Downtown Wakefield is even more walkable. And so I just thought that was kind of interesting, is that we see these lifestyle center developers really mimicking downtowns, town centers like we used to have. I think another thing to keep in mind is that consumers today are really looking for experiential shopping socializing and recreating. They want a place where they can find something to eat, where they can see a cultural event, where they can find some entertainment options. And I think Wakefield is positioned to be able to be that kind of social location for people. And one of the things I think is key is that not to think about downtown as just a shopping place, but really a social place. You know, it should be attractive and comfortable and have opportunities for people to recreate and socialize. And the premise here is if people are comfortable and if they're coming to socialize, they'll stay longer and then they'll spend more. And that the town center will have multi-function for them. You know, there should be places for people to gather, you know, social gathering spots, opportunities that they can accommodate activities, performers, vendors. And the streetscape should be very inviting to stroll and sit and hang out. And the most successful downtowns are the ones that have a great interface between what's happening inside the businesses and the street. So lots of large open windows that people can see in, streets, sidewalk dining or street side dining, you know, so there's a lot of vibrancy that come into these kind of districts. And a lot of that is already happening in Wakefield. You've got some nice restaurants, big windows, outdoor dining, and probably you want to look at even trying to increase that more and adding more vitality with these kind of elements. One of the things I didn't have in my presentation when we talked last year, I just thought I'd emphasize this whole idea of experiences, because this is really the direction that we're going in a lot of commercial areas. Retail is always going to have an inherent competition with the internet. And so what we're seeing downtowns and commercial centers focusing on is more recreation, experiences, things to do, eating, and even the retail is more experiential. And so this is the kind of stuff that we're seeing popping up in a lot of commercial districts, you know, paint bars and, you know, paint your pet projects and play rooms and bowling and exercises and you know, entertainment and escape rooms. I don't know if you have any people familiar with escape rooms. Yes, no? I went to my first escape room a few weeks ago in a commercial district. They had taken an old jail cell in the basement, turned it into an escape room, and it's a whole experience that you go through. They lock you up and you try to get out. It's like a game. And that's popping up all over the place, very popular with millennials. And so I just thought, you know, I would kind of pull some of this out to have you think about, because I think a lot of our commercial space, it might be difficult to fill it all up with retail. And I think we have to think beyond traditional retailers and think about recreation and social activities and experiences. And especially when you think about the future of our downtowns, I think we have to look at who's coming up, who's going to be the customers, and looking at the younger generation and the millennials, the 18 to 34-year-olds, and how they live their life and how they shop and dine and recreate. And these are some of those kind of activities. A couple of things that came out of our work from last year is that it's important to activate your public spaces and your activity venues as much as possible. And you've got some beautiful venues here in Wakefield, you know, a great library and beautiful civic center and a number of other venues. And also, as you increase the programming, try very hard to strengthen the economic links between the businesses and the programming, so that when you're having events or activities, that there also is being planned and done in a way that the businesses in downtown are benefiting from that. And then the other thing that we talked about last year was continuing efforts to explore possibilities to create an arts and culture venue. And it's really nice to see that you've done that. So now the Albion Cultural Exchange is up and going and operating, and there is another cultural venue and the Arts Collaborative of Wakefield. So that was really, you know, I'm delighted to see that. And additional programming, you know, that are coming. So a lot of the stuff that we were talking about more entertainment and more experiences and bringing those kind of things down into downtown is already happening. And Amanda Chisholm is here from MAPC, and she's going to talk to you in a few minutes about a new project, which is studying the area to develop an arts corridor. And that's another, you know, kind of a continuation of the work that we did with the task force a year ago. When we did the presentation at the end of the year last year, one of the things we talked about is downtowns that had recurring events. Because I think recurring events that you can plan on, you know it's going to be a first Thursday, it's going to happen once a month, are really important for downtowns, and it creates a relationship with the residents because people can plan on it. And we talked about Jamaica Plain. These are pictures from Jamaica Plain's first Thursday, which started out small, but year after year they've been building on it, and it's really a major event now that's extremely well attended. And it's great to see that now Wakefield has got a first Thursday event. So I know this was your first year. It started in June, and there's been a number of different themes, and I'm sure it will build year after year. So that's great to see that that was happening. And this was a slide that we showed last year at the conclusion of our work, and I just use it as an example of a quirky indigenous event. This is Union Square, and they have the Marshmallow Fluff Festival every year, and because marshmallow fluff was invented there. So it's really an indigenous activity. Nobody else can have a fluff festival, and I think it does a great service to their branding. You know, it really makes them unique. And so I was just going to throw that out there to think about as you think about events. And I know that you've got a lot of events here, the holiday stroll, the Italian festival, right? You do a lot of nice events, the train show. You know, I think there can always be more. I think that you want to have an activity going on almost all the time, you know, so that people think about, oh, if I want to find something to do, this is where I go. I come to downtown. And you know, when I was thinking about the presentation tonight and I was remembering the Marshmallow Fluff Festival slide, you know, there's some parallels here between Union Square and Wakefield. Because Union Square has got a Main Street organization, and they also have an organization called Union Arts, which is part of their Arts Council. And they work collaboratively, and they're a partnership. And so it just made me think about Wakefield with the Wakefield Main Street and with the Arts Collaborative of Wakefield. And one of the things that I thought I would just show you is that in Union Square, one of the things that they realized was, and you maybe have hit this too, and we see this in a lot of downtowns, organizations can only handle so many events, and you reach capacity, right? You've got your group of volunteers, and how many events can you really put on in a year? And this was just something interesting that they tried in Union Square, and they did it for many years. They would put out what they call a call for producers. And so they would, it was like a request for proposals for groups that wanted to put on cultural events in downtown, or in their case, in their commercial district. And they put out these applications, and people had to come up with the theme. They would have to manage the event, they'd have to manage the vendors, they had to take care of all the activities that go along with these events, but they would put in a proposal, and they had a program where there was a little bit of money that would help fund some of these events. So some of the events didn't require any funding, they just required a venue, and some of the events required a little bit of money. So their grant program was like up to $1,200 for an event. But why they were doing this is they wanted to bring more and different and unique events into the area, but they knew they couldn't manage them all. And I see that in a lot of downtowns, that they get to that point and they reach their capacity. I don't know if you know Turner's Falls, way out, little tiny itty bitty town. They have a tremendous amount of events there. Very artistic town, lots of things going on all the town. And they have an organization called River Culture. And at the beginning, River Culture was putting on all the events. But they quickly, reached their capacity. And they moved over into a system like this where they encouraged other groups to put on events. So then they had a lot of groups that would put on one event a year. But in downtown, it made a lot of events. But one organization didn't have to manage them all. So I just, when I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about Union Square, I just thought I would share that with you. One more thing about events. We did a study in Boston a couple of years ago about the economic impact of events in business districts, and we studied 9 business districts. And we looked at everything from festivals, farmers markets, art shows, the August Moon Festival in Chinatown. So we looked at a lot of different organizations and events, And the findings that came out were pretty interesting. We found out that first, the events attract a large number of people. They often attract people that are outside the area. So in this case, a third of the attendees came from another zip code. It attracts customers with disposable income. So when we compared the disposable income of the event attendees to the surrounding population, it was significantly higher. The events increase awareness of local businesses. So one of the things that I thought was interesting is that 37% of the attendees discovered businesses that they didn't know was there. So sometimes events don't create more business for the businesses on that day, but we're hoping to create sort of a connection with businesses and an awareness of businesses that customers will come back to. And we did see that in the events that we looked at, on average, people that were coming to the events patronized 2 businesses during the same day. So on their way to or during or after the event, they at least went to 2 businesses on average. So just a couple of some of the other findings. Downtown Wakefield's got strong demographics and a high density of customers, and so that's something that I think you can use in business recruitment material. 40,000 people live within 2 miles. That's a significant number of people, and average household income over $100,000. That's a good soundbite when you're trying to recruit new businesses to downtown. I think you should capitalize on opportunities presented by all market segments. So we've been talking, we talked a lot about the resident market segment, but also people that are coming in to attend events, that are using the lake, that are coming in or near downtown, that there should be, we should try to figure out how to capitalize on those market segments. And particularly the lake. That was a stunner for me when I came here. If you were to say, one thing that makes you so unique, I don't know any other downtown that has this beautiful of a water feature right there. And the thing is, though, the physical connection and the mental connection needs to be reinforced. When you're at the lake, you don't really feel like you're steps away from downtown. It doesn't seem like there's a connection. And so it seems like perhaps with some physical amenities, you could think about how to strengthen that connection a little bit. Maybe if banners came from downtown all the way to the lake, maybe if there was some other unifying physical or architectural elements. The path on the left is the path from the lake to the core of downtown. So it's an attractive walk. But with the grade, when you're looking up, you don't necessarily know that it's there. The other, possibility is to maybe think about some kiosks, informational kiosks that might be at the lake, and you might find some other places where you might want to look at them. These are like what you might see in a shopping mall, but these are outside in downtown. It just gives information about the downtown and what's there. And if you have those at the lake and you have a lot of lake users, they might be more enticed to come up. I think another finding is there is an abundance of commercial space in downtown Wakefield. You've got a lot of space. And as you are moving forward with revitalization and vibrancy enhancing strategies, you might want to think about creating target nodes or target areas because you want to make sure that you have impact in the activities that you do. So you might want to start with prioritizing. And the other thing is to maybe think about prioritizing certain areas for businesses that have walk-in trade and similar hours. So when you think about a downtown, these kind of businesses are great to have next to each other. A retail shop and a restaurant, because they have a walk-in trade, and you can come from the bookstore and go over to the restaurant. They're open on Saturdays and Sundays, they might be open into the evenings, and their customers help each other. But when you start intertwining with businesses that are not open on the weekends, that might close at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, offices or chiropractor or insurance or contractors or those kind of things, what it does to your downtown is it makes it less leasable. So with some of these spaces, when that space turned over, if it was next to these two things, it would be harder to get a retail tenant back in there. And in downtowns, that sometimes becomes a little bit of a snowball. And so, not that you don't want all these kinds of uses, but you might want to target certain areas where you cluster your walk-in trade businesses, and then you've got other businesses that are more for contractors or offices that have different kinds of businesses. Clustering in critical mass are really integral to successful downtowns, and here you've got some burgeoning clusters, certainly restaurants, entertainment, and recreation, and I think maybe you definitely have a restaurant cluster.